Hey guys, welcome back to Final Sector. We are looking at the Spanish Grand Prix that just happened. It's our race breakdown. If you enjoy our content, remember to subscribe, hit like if you like it, share it with your friends. We're just looking to create a nice little community here, so if you know anyone that might like this kind of content, share it around. If you're listening on Spotify, remember to follow us to get us all in your feed, and you get our podcast, which should be coming out. We'll get the next one to be after Monaco. You'll get it 3 days earlier than YouTube as well. So stay tuned for that one. I think our next one's going to be, like I said, the week after Monaco. So that'll be a good one too. But we're talking about the Spanish Grand Prix. A lot happened. It's probably one of the more eventful Spanish Grand Prix we've had in recent times. A lot of it, I think, due to the sheer heat of the weekend. It was hot. It was very, very hot, and it
was hot, and it was windy too.
Windy,
extra
yes,
variables.
yeah. We'll get into that, but let's start out with. I've got a few talking points. We'll go into the first thing I've got here, and it's Leclerc's roller coaster weekend. I kind of want to, because he sort of went like these real highs and real lows, starting even in qualifying, like the Q3 run that he had, the very first one where he spun on provisional pole time. Spun in the, it was the final chicane, wasn't it? It was like right
Coming
at the end
out
of the lap.
it was a weird spin,
a real low speed spin, and it threw away the lap, and it's just like, oh, it's getting exciting, and then he pulls out an absolute blinder in the final one. Yeah, it was like 0.3 quicker, I think, than anyone else, and yet only having one attempt to do that, it was pretty huge. And then, moving on to the race, he, started from pole, had a really good, really comfortable lead, and then engine go kaboom, and, gets no points. Not great. It was just up and down for him all weekend, it seemed like. But he was on his way to a very, very comfortable win, it seemed, before what turned out to be an MGUH and turbo failure of his power units. So... yeah, it's not good, not great for Ferrari and Leclerc's championship. So, yeah.
I guess to emphasize that point where you said it was comfortable, it was... I mean, you still say the Ferrari, I think, was pretty damn strong and comfortable in that heat for the most part.
Yeah.
But it still, you wouldn't say was the dominant force of the car. Partly we might not know because Red Bull, again, seemed to have a few little issues here and there, which we'll probably go into.
Yeah.
And so the gap between him and Max there was a bit of a gap, but there wasn't that much. But what he then did was, when everyone else was struggling with, as we said, the heat, with the wind, with tyres, with failures at least at that point to the race, he kind of wasn't having any issues and he was keeping it very clean, and therefore he managed a massive gap despite not having really performance gap. But then, as you say, we suddenly cut to him. We went, oh, there's a Ferrari. And we went, oh, that's a Ferrari going slowly. And then you heard the radio call immediately going, no! And you went, oh, you know what that means whenever you hear the screaming on the radio when the race hasn't finished yet.
Yeah.
So whatever it was, instantly they just knew, oh dear, this is curtains, right? And you kind of then took a little bit, I guess at that point things were maybe a little bit, not that it was sleepy overall, but still a little bit of a dip, right? And then that kind of shook you awake and went, well, what does this mean? Okay, let's look at second. What's happening here? Oh, it's popping off. Oh, that's right.
Yes, yeah.
We've been following a battle going on here for a while. Now this is a battle for the lead. It's not just for second.
Exactly, yeah. I think it's speaking a little bit more about the actual failure that he had. Like I said, it was they seemed to think it was power unit. It sounded like power unit when it went clonk and but we didn't really know. But Ferrari obviously came out and said it was MGUH and turbo failure, and they analyzed the issue and they said, and I quote, "are satisfied it did not occur through a design fault or reliability issue." And I'm very confused because that mean they meant for it to fail.
Yes.
How is that not a reliability issue? Like,
it sells more hats. It's proven.
Yeah. I don't know. That sort of comment confused me a little bit because, like, I don't understand how that, like, design fault. Sure, like they can get away with saying it wasn't a design fault, but how could they not say it was a reliability issue when it happened?
Yeah, that's...
I don't know. Maybe it was a miscalculation. Maybe they were running the engine like they weren't. It was like
maybe they were just gambling a bit, running hot.
Yeah, potentially something like that. That could be the issue. They didn't, as far as I can tell, they didn't explain exactly what happened with it. They just said it wasn't a reliability or design fault, like reliability issue or design fault. So I just thought that comment was a bit confusing. So,
well, it's also you want. It's interesting what they mean by it, because of course the story up to this point has been both cars on the edge. Red Bull is quick, but it's likely to go kaput, right? And this is kind of the first time we've actually seen the Ferrari properly go kaput when it's been the kind of one dominating.
Well, there was also, around the same time, Zhou Guanyu went out with a suspect power unit issue as well. And that was around the same point of the race. And I'm just like, oh, maybe this Ferrari engine just can't handle, like, really high temperatures. But as it turns out, it was the Mercedes that couldn't handle the really high temperatures.
Yes.
Despite, I guess we'll move on to them. I had that a bit later, but seeing as I brought them up, let's bring up Mercedes. And for the most part, their continued rise back to competitiveness at the front. They get a P3, P5 for the weekend. George gets, it's his second podium, I think, of the year, isn't it? Yeah, he's doing very, very well. Still has the measure of Hamilton. Hamilton obviously had that.
He did have
not good incident at the start with Kevin Magnussen, but
had the measure on raw pace.
Yes,
but I guess look, there's a lot to break down here, right? We should say that this, as we said in our preview, Spain was when a lot of teams brought upgrades.
Yes.
Some teams had joy with those. Others were still got question marks of what the hell they brought and if this actually helped or not, right?
If they copied
the green variety, maybe. Yes.
Perhaps.
Yes. Yep. But on the Mercedes, look, we saw in practice they seemed pretty happy. In quali in general, they actually seemed a lot closer. They properly seemed to be like at least right in the middle of that gap between the top two teams and everyone else.
They were really comfortable P3.
Yeah, there was even like you could argue that Bottas was maybe there and here and there, but still under the pressure he kind of fumbled a bit, and those two Mercedes were, pretty solid. But I guess what's interesting, I think, going forward is like we saw elements of Russell and his fighting and battling, and yes, he did kind of fight a wounded Red Bull, but he still was driving pretty solidly and decent pace. And I think what was more surprising was Hamilton. Yes, he had that incident at the start with Magnussen.
Yep.
It was I think an unfortunate accident for both parties. It almost looks like there was it's like in like a sim racing game when you almost get like sideways lag or something, and you kind of side by side you hit, and you're like, how did we hit? And in this case, you're on board with both, and you kind of go, I don't understand. Neither of them moved, and then suddenly they just touched.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it was a light touch, which had really bad ramifications.
Hamilton got very unlucky that he got a puncture from that. Like another day, you don't get a puncture, and you're just like, scuff the sidewall a bit, and you go on with your life. But yeah, I think it was watching that back from Hamilton's point of view. I saw that touch. I'm like, that's so unlucky to get a puncture from that.
Yes.
But it obviously he ended up, I think, right at the back after the pit stop.
He was right at the back because he had to squander around on a flat tire. I thought what was interesting is, understandably, he was coming on the radio and going like, "Is this even worth it to stay out here, just considering the heat reliability and that?"
People are giving him a lot of shit for that. And I'm just I don't think you understand the situation.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway,
go
on. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're okay. I won't go into it. But again, it's a guy who's just his first weekend, he's seen a great car, and he's basically feels like he's out of it lap one. That's gonna hurt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, that's why he's got such a good relationship with his engineers. Engineer can just say, nope, faff off with that, head down, we can get points. And lo and behold, without a safety car, a virtual safety car, any sort of magic strategy or luck, he caught up and then some, to the point where he didn't even finish that far behind Russell. And if he didn't even have an issue at the end of the race, which I think it was the last 3 or 4 laps, we heard the engineers come onto the radio to both Russell and Hamilton, and basically say, this is critical, flashing lights are real, essentially meaning your car is going to explode. As we know, this is the zero concept Mercedes, so this was, I guess, the perfect test for them. I guess the fact they made it to that far through the Grand Prix before there was a potential issue means that
George had his issue in clean air with the fighting, so...
See, they said that George had that issue, but then you didn't really see his pace drop because of that, right? So either he was actually driving a little less than, the ceiling of that car, which means there's more to come, despite the fact he was able to defend pretty well from Verstappen and Checo. For other reasons as well, they were aided by due to some Red Bull issues going on. But regardless, even if he wasn't driving at 100%, there was still decent pace there, right? So,
for sure.
But yeah, more so just saying Hamilton, then telling him to put his head down, which is what he did, and he didn't end up well, you should say as well, he should have had a P4, but he had to basically save the car and, give up the place. But to get, even in olden days, do you think the past few years and how dominant that Mercedes had been, if it was all the way at the back, maybe you go, oh, P4 is maybe what you can expect.
Exactly.
And he got there in a car which is so far off the top two teams and a lot closer to the midfield. So credit to Hamilton for pulling it together, and I think we haven't seen the true pace of that Mercedes when they get it together. They seemed a lot more confident, a lot more happy, and in a race where the weather was basically the dire worst for their car when they have the least cooling of any team. So going somewhere where it's cooler. No idea about Monaco, mind you. I think, again, that's not going to be representative at all.
No,
we'll go
no,
into
I think
that in our preview.
Monaco's a bit of an outlier, I feel like. That's
but
that's entirely a confidence track, I think,
Yes, yeah. But as we go into some races after that where it's cooler or different types of tracks, I'm very interested to see where that gap is, or if they can sniff there, or, snipe a Checo or snipe a Sainz now and then.
I think there is 100%, and they've been saying this as well. It's been hard to see from the outside, but they've obviously been saying they see the potential in the car if they can get their issues under control. They did come with new floor upgrades. I should mention, they had a filming day right before the Grand Prix, likely to test all these parts. I think it was at Paul Ricard. And yeah, they obviously must have brought them, or maybe tinkered with them a little bit to bring to this Grand Prix. They have severely reduced porpoising. They do still have some through some of the high-speed corners, apparently, which they need to dial out. But apparently they were able to run way lower, which you could actually see on the side cams. Like, they were running really close to the ground. It feels like a lot closer than they have been in previous races, especially considering how many high-speed corners there are at Barcelona, and obviously the
and how critical it is, as you say, to defend on those two straights.
Absolutely.
So it's no point having that speed in the corners if on the straight you're just a sitting duck and everyone breezes by. So we saw that again with that race-long fight.
For sure. I think there is. They say that there is definitely still that potential. That obviously if they can, now that they understand their porpoising problem, now they can actually, rather than focusing their efforts, like in their entirety of their efforts on fixing this problem, now they can be like, okay, now we can start to find the gains in this package, which I think is something that teams have obviously been doing for the last sort of 4 races, you would say. First couple of races, I think people were trying to figure out issues for the most part, except for Ferrari, who just started with the perfect package, essentially. But, they are probably 3 or 4 races behind, but the fact that they're a comfortable P3 and getting podiums and looking good on genuine pace with a package that is the ceiling is still probably so high for it. I think it's very good for Mercedes and for Hamilton and George, and particularly because they've been picking up all these points that they shouldn't have, and they've sort of kept themselves in contention. Kept themselves close to those two teams. I think I said this a couple of races ago, or last race or something, in one of those videos. Like, if they can just stay close enough when they do understand it, and if they have a car that's fast enough, they'll be there, and this will be a 3-way fight. Like, that's an exciting prospect, I think, to look forward to. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I think even from the perspective, if we think that unless there's disaster, they still might fall short a little bit, but just to then be an extra factor in Ferrari and Red Bull that are trying to fight for a title, right? Like, we haven't really had, even last year, all you really think was Max and Hamilton and kind of their teammates trying to back them up or not really get in the way. But in this case, you've got now a third external party that's just trying to go because they want to perform and get positions in that, kind of interfering in that too. So how that plays out as well. And if you think maybe they don't fight, maybe Max and Hamilton are going for the win, and Max maybe doesn't fight him as hard because he knows, I'll just bank the second place because I'm still ahead of Leclerc in third or fourth, right?
Yeah.
And you start thinking about permutations like that, it gets really interesting and something we haven't seen for a long time.
Yes, yeah. I'm very excited. I do hope that, because, like you say, it's not something we've seen for a long time. It's usually just been kind of this, it's almost kind of, yeah, exactly. It kind of feels like for those who live in, I'm not sure about the UK, but like the US and Australia, it's kind of like the political parties. It's like, you get this party or you get this party, and you can bank on the other parties, but they're not getting in. It's these parties. It's the 2-party system. And I feel like
there'll be a cool little story from one or the other.
Exactly. Or, they'll get a few places in Parliament. Oh, it's all exciting and everything, and then it's like, but this party won by like 700.
Yes, the big story is still exactly.
So. it feels like Formula One's been that for a while. It's just been either two teams or two drivers, and they've just them, and then everyone else is like, oh, they can do their thing on their day, but there's no way they get anywhere close. And having a third team and what looks like two... George has obviously showed how he's just in that car and he's just on it immediately.
Yeah.
Hamilton he's been a bit unlucky, but he's shown even this race that you can get from the back of the grid to what would have been P4, in a car that's third fastest at a track that is hard to overtake historically. So.
And is 100 million degrees, which the Mercedes doesn't like.
No.
Probably more than any other car.
Probably, yeah. Maybe the McLaren with their cooling issues, which they seem to have gotten a handle on the last couple of races.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's the story to look forward to. I think that Mercedes coming back through, that'll make the championship way more interesting, I think. But let's move on to, I guess, the third team in that potential battle we haven't talked about. Let's move on to Red Bull. And I had a very clever comment, which I'm going to point out, and you can feel free to edit this out if you don't like it. But I was like, DRS, more like DR less.
Nice, very good. More like DR.
I'll be here next Tuesday, folks.
Anyway. More like DR. I hit the button 100 times. Why isn't it working?
Yeah. So Max, I should point out, obviously, Red Bull got a 1-2 again. Hugely dominant weekend for Red Bull. Red Bull and Max take both titles now from Ferrari and Charles. So they're now the ones to beat. It seems like they just have whatever reliability issues they did have with the engine seem to have mostly gone away, it seems like. But Max did have this weird issue with the DRS where sometimes it would work and then sometimes it wouldn't. It would just like flap open and flap shut, which I still don't know if it was because he was pushing it a bunch of times. Like maybe it was just like an initial issue and it was like it did that thing because it was like some kind of weird technical thing, and then because he was like, it happened twice and then they fixed it, and now he's just sitting there going, open. And it's just doing this, basically.
I would suspect it was a deep issue, because we even saw this first really rear its head. What was it? His final... Part of the reason as well we didn't really get his final lap from Quali was because he started his lap and he thought he was down on power, and it turns out actually his DRS didn't open.
That's right.
So although there was some rules in Parc Ferme, if you have a broken part and you switch it part for part, you're still able to show that you can fix that. So they did some work overnight. We even saw on the grid they took the car out last minute, partly because of all the temperatures, they didn't want to get the cars out there, but partly because they were working on things. Took it out to the grid, still working on some things, went out for the race, and sure enough, we saw him start to fight, and then the commentator team went, I didn't see that wing open, did you? And then you heard on the radio going, what the fuck are you doing? GP going, hey, we'll figure this out.
Yep.
And sure enough, throughout the race, we were like, one lap, oh, it's working. Over the radio, it's working now. Next lap, it's not working.
It
was like, oh,
it was so weird. It seemed to be like I was keeping a pretty close eye on it, and it was like it seemed like every other lap, like literally every other lap, it'd be like one lap is like it works fine because you could see his closing speed. It's like that DRS is absolutely open. And then literally the next lap's like, nope, he's not closing, that's not open.
Yep.
Next lap, oh, it's open. Next lap, no, it's closed. It was every other lap. There must be some kind of issue with that. It's so
on the back
weird.
straight too, it seems they focused on it less because it's the back straight. But on the back straight too, where they have that zone, it was the same thing.
Yeah, I'm not too very, very odd. You'd want to hope they get something like that fixed, but it's...
You don't know the cause. It might be that because they're in Parc Ferme, they needed to...
Yeah, it's possible.
You don't know what it is. They were just trying to adapt on the fly, and now they know what the issues, they can fix it. We'll know.
What it did lead to is a fantastic battle between Max and George for what was P2, I think, at the time. And which ended up being for P1, I think, once.
Yes.
Yeah. Once,
so it's still in the middle of the fight, which is...
That's correct, yes. But yeah, that was probably some of the best battling there. George sort of... they alluded to the fact that George had his line into T1, where he would sort of cover that that sort of duck into the inside pretty much every single time. He used it numerous times, and he also used it against Perez when Perez tried to fight him at the end as well. Pretty much carbon copy stuff. But there was that one that I think he did get past him, and then George just had such a good run out of that sort of that complex and just came straight back past him. It was sort of, oh my god, it was such a good move. It was.
What's so good about that corner, which we've always seen, and I almost like that the grass is there too, because you can be daring on it as well if you want to.
Yep.
But it's a really good corner to sell the kind of the double dummy, because when you're coming to the inside, you still don't really want to be in the inside, but you know you have to defend there. So often you can get the leading car to start to go on the inside. When you see they've almost committed, then you know that you can dive up the inside, because they're not allowed to then make a second move, because they've kind of committed. So that's what we saw in that case, which was when George kind of moved over and Max went, oh, I'm going to go wide here. But then he went, oh, Juke Joe went to the inside. But then George kind of pulled out a bit and then just knew there was so much grip on the outside and just flew by him. And then into that second corner, and this is what the best guys can do, right? He knew that he had millimeters that he didn't have to then stay on the inside to then be on the outside of the long right-hander. He had just enough to then cut across to then block the line into the next corner. And the millimeter perfection you need there is what separates the pros from the amateurs. And even in sim racing and everything, to know that you do have just enough to dive just ahead of him, right? We saw it with last year with Silverstone with Hamilton and Max knew he could just cut across Hamilton after the first straight, right? It's that thing again. So brilliant racing. It was amazing. Yes, Max was harmed slightly by his inconsistent DRS, and of course the laps where he was closest, he didn't have it. But George still put up an amazing fight, and it's certainly for, as we say, for a Spanish Grand Prix, which can be a bit boring, there was plenty of every lap. It was like, okay, we'd get the popcorn out again. It was great.
Definitely that. I would say the first probably little over half. Of the race, I think was super exciting. Obviously, with the issues that people had, we had signs going off the gravel, going off into the gravel turn 4, lap 7. Didn't even talk about
guys
that.
Going off into the gravel.
Yeah, exactly. We had
wind
it was so weird because signs obviously went off and just lost the rear. It seemed like a really weird incident. That was lap 7. He dropped back to like P11. I think it was P5. We thought, oh no, Science is having another bad weekend. And 2 laps later, Max decided he wanted to do the exact same thing. Like it was almost carbon copy incident, just sort of going into the corner. Whoop, there goes the rear. And then we get this call over the radio to Max like, there's a crosswind in turn 4. It's like, thank you. Bit late. But he dropped to P4, which is why he was I think fighting in all these battles in the first place, because was he running P2? And then
he was running P2, and he wasn't really that. He was in a position with Russell, which we've seen in the previous races, where you wouldn't be surprised if he was dropping back a bit and then tried to close towards the middle part of the race, right? But then, of course, he had his big shaboots, and that's when Leclerc went, okay, see ya.
Yeah, exactly.
I think actually we might have been treated a bit to a nice battle because of the DRS issues. I think one thing we saw very early on was a lot of cars in the midfield making really easy passes. Like poor Mick Schumacher came onto the straight, was ages away, and someone just went boom, and like halfway down the straight, the pass was already made on him, and you just saw him go backwards, and you were like, okay, DRS is pretty strong here. Credit to a track, which normally even the DRS isn't necessarily that helpful, because through that twisty last sector, you can't really stay close.
Yeah.
So as we suspected with these new cars and that, it could have been partially the heat as well, who knows. They were able to stick much closer, but that just meant the DRS was so powerful. It was free passes if you were faster than the guy in front of you.
I would say potentially that's one of the reasons why the 3-stopper was so much better as well, is because
we haven't even talked about that. The 3-stopper was the right strategy. What is F1?
We
saw people going, oh, the 2-stopper was horrible today, but it's not because of the 1, it's because of the 3.
Bottas I think would have had a much better. I think he came over the radio, one of the first to say, 2-stopper was the wrong play. He dropped to P6
behind
5,
Sainz, Hamilton,
6.
and Russell.
Yes,
behind that gaggle.
Something like that, So
6 it would have been, right?
Something like that. Yeah. But I mean, still fantastic for him. He still seems to think he's in the Mercedes, apparently. Because he
was fighting the Mercedes.
Exactly.
And if
every weekend he seems to be around the Mercedes. It's so weird.
If he 3-stopped, he still could have beaten both of them as well. Which if it's still versing an upgraded Mercedes,
mate, he's doing incredibly. But yeah, that three stopper seemed to be super powerful. Just killing the rubber just by going faster, staying close to that car in front, just using that overtake, that DRS to overtake down the straight. It just seemed to be the play. I guess the super high temperatures and the new cars sort of helped that. So I'm not sure. Maybe they'll look at potentially making that DRS zone a little bit shorter in the future.
Well, I think they're looking at changing the last sector anyway. I don't know if they said they're going to use the full MotoGP line, but I think they said they do want to for next year and following years take a look at maybe adjusting that final corner. Maybe they'll take more speed in, then they might reduce the DRS. So I can kind of see how an overall change there might improve things even further.
Sure, yeah. Well, we'll see. I think the only other point that I really had here, I guess we can talk about a little bit more of the midfield things. This can lead into it, but we sort of touched on it a bit earlier on, and that's the pink Mercedes has now become a green Red Bull. And we saw on the Red Bull pit wall they were having the green cans of Red Bull, which I thought was really funny. See, that's the kind of banter I like. Like, they don't. I think they're still fighting it a little bit, but the FIA investigation cleared them of all wrongdoing. For all those who don't know, Aston Martin came to the. We said in our preview they were likely to come with or
significant
rumored
upgrade,
to come with. I actually didn't think it was going to happen, but yeah, they were coming with a significant upgrade, mainly to the side pods, and it turns out those side pods are very similar to the Red Bull ones, but so there was an investigation whether or not they were copying Red Bull's design. The FIA has cleared it. Aston's come out and said basically at the start of the season they had two designs of side pod that they were choosing, that they were going to go with. They eventually went with this one. Said they were surprised when they saw the Red Bull one at testing because they're like, oh, that's very similar to ours. FIA said they cleared them. They must have come up with their like CAD
when they want to submit the design, and part of the big changes that were from the pink Mercedes fiasco was that now you have to show that you have genuine IP and documents to show that you started to create something and build it from scratch, right? And again, as they said, even for them to, at the start of the year, have looked at that Red Bull and copied it and then produced it to bring it here, they said that for £1 billion, there's no way you could do it, right? Unless you had the facilities of the whole world to help you, which they, of course, they don't this year, especially with the cost saving. So they did say that, they had two designs they were working on last year, which is interesting. The first team we've heard that they did have two kind of core designs. We saw that from Mercedes, but it felt more like that maybe they were just running kind of like an interim design that they'd already scrapped off to make sure their zero concept design was ready. And they've still been adamant, and as we've seen now, that's the design they're going down. They scrapped off their first beta copy completely.
Yeah, they said they were open to going to scrapping the no pod design, but they were really hesitant to do it.
They would only if they realized this is no hope.
Exactly,
and this race weekend was kind of a showing of going, no, we know we've got it here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But in Aston's case, so they brought the new upgrade. There was this kind of back and forth drama, which doesn't seem to be much of, even though they are very, very similar. So that's, of course, going to cause conversation. But then they actually went out on the track and
they didn't. They
seemed
they were where they were where we sort of expected them to be. I guess. I guess not the greatest upgrade for Aston if they thought
their
they were
race
gonna go...
pace was okay considering, but their raw pace on quali was dreadfully slow. For when you would say this is a significant change and upgrade, and then you kind of went, "Are you sure?" And they just like foil that's sculpted to make it look different, but it's the same car.
Very, very strange. Yeah, maybe that has more potential in that. Like again, it could be just like they haven't done any development with that style of car now that they need.
Or it could be this was a glorified test session. We don't know.
Potentially, yeah. The one thing I will mention is that I think it's still sort of ongoing. I know that Red Bull have basically come out and said that, which we would have reported on like last year, there was a lot of staff that went from Red Bull to Aston late last year. Like a lot of staff went from various teams, a lot of them for Red Bull to Aston Martin. And there's this thought that, maybe some of that staff have
transfer of IP.
Transfers. Yeah, exactly. They've used information that they've had in Red Bull to develop this Aston
Yep.
chassis, or these Aston sidepod design in a way that breaks the IP contract thing with Red Bull that they have.
Yep.
So I don't know if that's going to be the case. I think it could just be
they're allowed to raise it, right? The point is they're saying that we're
yeah.
fully aware teams are allowed to raise it, and they've said we will properly look into it. But Aston and that have confidently, considering they caused the controversy that changes rules in the first place,
they're
not
like,
going to
we're fine. Yeah,
they're not going to try to then sneak it again. They'd obviously, if they can do this, make sure they do it by the book. Considering last time they were arguably very close to getting more than a slap on the wrist that they did.
Yeah.
They kind of went, "You've been very cheeky here. Don't do it again." So.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, they've been very open and say, we're open to any investigations. We think they're pretty confident. So, I assume that's probably more or less the last we'll hear of it. I think it is just probably a bizarre coincidence that we thought. The one thing I guess I will say is that I guess coming into the start of this season, we and a lot of others were kind of worried that all the cars would look exactly the same, and we were kind of treated the fact that actually all of them looked very different. And this is maybe just one of the examples that show, okay, two teams did actually think of a similar design. Obviously, they diverged at the start, but it shows that, two teams did have similar designs. So, and maybe that is just down to the fact that there's only so much you can design with the restrictions you have on these cars as well.
There's only so much you can research into them as well, right?
Exactly,
before you have to make a call. In this case, maybe they did, as you say, see the performance of the Red Bull and go, actually, let's go back to this, develop it further, because we can see that we kind of went down the same thought process independently. It's not like this is like an open book where someone says draw a picture and you get two pictures that are so close you go, what the hell, that's obviously copied. It's still fundamentally with aerodynamics, there are only so many different ways that the car can run, right?
I'm just picturing a guy on like the Aston Martin pit wall who's got like a picture of the Red Bull and he's literally like a piece of paper on top of it. He's like tracing it and he's like,
well, that was why it was Tracing
Aston
Point, wasn't
Martin,
it?
Tracing Point, yeah, exactly. So you can't really do that with Aston Martin. We'll have to come up with a clever name with like something with tracing, something with copy.
If you think about it, we'll be here all
Leave
night.
it in the comments or at Final Sector YT if you have a really clever name, and we'll use it and probably credit you.
Done.
All right,
Moving on to a team that did have an upgrade that actually showed really good race pace was Alpine. Both drivers out there. I should say Ocon started in a relatively decent position, but had a really good race and finished, I think it was it 70?
Seventh, I think he ended up in. Yeah.
And Alonso, I can't remember, what was the specific issue he had in qualifying? Was it that his car wouldn't start up or something?
So they had a miscommunication.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, so he had that Q2 and he got into the traffic jam and he was like, he thought they were really low on time, so he was trying to overtake everyone to start his lap.
That's why you saw him diving down through all the traffic and you're going, what the bloody hell is he doing?
Yeah, so he thought he was going to miss the flag, and I guess the team told him, was like, oh, we thought we were going to miss the flag. It's like, no, you have to go. Turns out he wouldn't have. So yeah,
they had like 20. There were 25 seconds under where they thought, and if they had kind of stayed back, they saw they. Yes, so his lap was compromised. He started kind of skidding into the last sector, and he was right behind Norris, which of course isn't going to help anyone.
Not great.
That's right. So they did kind of had a faff up there, which was strange, and everyone was kind of like, "How do you like everyone at home can see the timer? Is this a little odd?"
Yeah.
But as we said in the race, they both sounded happy, confident. Alonso had a great charge. Ocon was comfortable out there.
Yeah, we should say that Alonso decided to take an engine and start from the back of the grid. I think he took a penalty. Took an extra engine because he was starting 17th anyway. So
they thought it would be of their advantage to take a fresh one. I guess considering the heat and everything, safe to take a fresh engine anyway.
Yep.
But again, they seemed pretty powerful and confident out there. Whether it was partly the weather and their cars more adapted to it, but regardless, if they have brought a package and they're having a battling result like that, you'd go, that looks pretty good, especially when you look at who do you see as one of their main rivals. Well, Aston Martin, completely different worlds, right?
It's crazy. Alpine are just sort of showing, I think they're the two sort of standout ones that always seem to be on a trend that they're always towards the front, outside the top three teams. You've got the Alpine and then specifically Bottas of Alfa Romeo. I think Zhou, I think he's still finding his feet a little bit. He's been a little bit unlucky again with the retirement. this race.
I think it helps that. Yeah, I think Joe. Well, I guess crossover because why not? We don't want to be here forever.
Yeah.
Joe, I think he's the kind of driver where you'd think, considering the season he's had so far and the amount of retirements and that. I mean, we even saw his onboard again for this race. There seemed to be that weird 50-50 misstart thing, which is still happening, and yet he still seemed to recover okay from that. But he just isn't getting that much track time. Less because you see him in the barrier in the wall, more so his car just keeps dying, or an issue here, or a pit lane penalty that's served wrong there, and yet he still comes out and he's still quite chirpy, and Bottas is still like, oh, he's great, and I'm enjoying his time with him. So considering that you'd say as an outsider looks a bit doom and gloom, I don't think at all we can give him any sort of rating. I think we've got to wait till the second half of the season and then actually start to rate him, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I guess, conversely, we've got, I don't know, like...
the others.
Yeah. I mean...
Is this another weekend where for AlphaTauri there's like nothing to say? It seems like they were on the track, and then you think and you go, I don't have anything to say about them. They weren't in the spotlight, but then they weren't at the back. It's
I don't know. It's so
like
weird.
4 weeks in a row.
I mean, I guess McLaren... Yeah, they brought an upgrade package, and they just didn't seem... I guess, again, a lot of their upgrade is...
Go on.
I was going to say, a lot of theirs is they brought a lot of cooling stuff, but it was such a hot weekend. Maybe they were still struggling a little bit with it, but they just sort of...
I guess to their credit, when you look at Bahrain, their first race was quite warm, and they were so impacted by that braking.
Yeah.
Here, where you saw Lando actually having to fight, and again, got points, right? He was it P9 or P10 for Lando, I think? I don't have it up in front of me.
Yeah, it was back on the points. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. But still, he said, there was shots of him before the race, and he said he was violently unwell. I think he had tonsillitis, it was revealed after the race.
I think he still has it. I think there's a talk that there's a potential for someone to come in, like either a...
right, if it still is really bad,
yeah, someone to come in.
But to his credit, with how uncomfortable it was out there, to be able to fight and battle... And again, the contrast to seeing Daniel Ricciardo, who really struggled, seemed to just not gel it together for what reason. I don't know how credible they were, but I did see some articles starting to come out. The McLaren a little less, hey, we're going to work you to pick this up, and a little more, hey, we're getting into future talks here. You might want to stir up your resume a little bit here, buddy.
Yeah, I think Ricciardo was saying after the race that he had so... It was a sad race for him because he just had literally zero pace. Like just
he was another car where they went onto the straight. You just saw someone else go bye, and you're like, huh? What is it? Because he's just stuffed the tires? Has he not saved the battery?
I don't know what it is. Yeah.
But again, getting kind of crushed by his teammate who was very unwell. You kind of go, okay, this is thinking about the future. Lando's obviously there to stay, right? Not surprising that you start to think, okay, I think he's signed on until the end of next year, but. Again, beyond that, this would really when they say, "Hey, Daniel, come on, buddy."
Needs to find something. He needs to find something pretty soon, I think. And then the other one that I had was Haas. Haas were the only team to not bring updates, and they still managed.
Great quality.
Yeah, really great quality. P8, P10.
For Mick as well, got lucky and snuck in. Juice and Norris cutting limits, which was a weird cut. I didn't even know there could be track limits where he cut it, if you saw.
Yeah. I think
it's basically after like partway through the start of the final sector, you can go quite wide near the gravel. It's not uncommon for drivers to accidentally go out wide there, but it seems like it's almost like there's a millimeter which you can then say that you've gained time, and otherwise then you've either not cut the track, which means you're fine, or then you've gone into the dirt.
I'm okay with this because I think they said from the start of the weekend the track limits is the white line.
Yes.
White line everywhere. It's not just the white line on this corner or the white line on this corner.
That's
the rules.
Fair. Yep.
So in last year and previous years, track limits has been very, very ambiguous. If you can make it as black and white as possible, obviously when you're fighting or if you're forced off, like in a race situation, then you've got you can have
in
some
a time trial
variation.
format though.
Exactly. You need to have this black and white thing, and everyone needs to adhere. I think even Norris came out and said, like he said the same. He's like, I'm not sure. I think it's a bit unlucky that we got that penalty for that, but the white line is the white line, and he basically
they prefer consistency rather than having to argue every point every weekend.
And I think that's fine. If they just say, okay, this is the track limit, we're going to enforce it every single time. Fine, just adhere to it. granted, you know, it is a bit unlucky, but if they're trying to go out that far to try and get a better run out of that corner, like so far that they're actually risking going into the gravel, and they go over the white line and they get a penalty, then that's on them. You know, keep it within the limits, you know?
I guess it's almost like you'd think from a track design perspective, if you have a corner like that, where you almost encourage the drivers to run as wide as possible, right? But if they suddenly get the absolute perfect line and that counts as then being over the line, it's like, can't we just shift the line maybe 5 millimeters to the left? So then if you are cutting the track, or if you are at the track limits, that means you're in the dirt, right? But if you're not in the dirt, but you're really close to it, that means you're inside, right? Because if you do kind of get that perfect line, which is really hard to do because you're looking to your right for the next apex, you're not really looking to your left either, then I feel like that should be a driving thing that's rewarded, right? So I always think if you were going to change anything, not that you need to, it would just be a bit more satisfying. It's kind of like in GT Sport, right? There's certain tracks where you can, you know, kind of cut a corner to the absolute perfect inch, but if you do, you get a penalty. But unless you basically are touching that wall, then you'll never get it. It's only the corner cut when you nail it, and then you kind of feel worried about going for it, because you could get an absolutely perfect penalty, but the other 99 times, you won't get it perfect. So it kind of feels like that. I don't know. Maybe the racer in me is just like, it's a tiny bit unsatisfying, but through no fault of the rules, really.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. Like, a lot of people just say, don't have runoff areas, just put gravel everywhere. And that's basically what we're saying. Just put gravel on those parts. And it's like, well, if you just put gravel everywhere, then every track would feel the same. You know.
Well, then Sainz is never going to finish a race.
It's true. It's true. He will never finish a race again. He will.
At Monaco,
always...
they're installing a gravel trap at the end of the
God. Oh, imagine that! Like on the first apex on the inside they have gravel. Oh, imagine that. That'd
even
be
in the swimming pool, replace it with a beach.
A beach of gravel. Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. I mean, outside of that, I mean, you could talk. Williams were not good. I guess we can just say that they just had a bad weekend.
Just seemed to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, not great for them. But I mean, that's really all the points I had. I don't know if you had anything else, but otherwise we can wrap it up.
I don't believe there's anything, and I think that's a good time to wrap it up anyway.
Beautiful. Thanks again for watching. Let us know your thoughts on the Grand Prix. Was it good? Do we think the Spanish Grand Prix is finally good with these new cars, or at least has potential? I think there's potential for some good races. That one I think was good. Again, a lot of it owed to temperature, but I think the fact that they can follow a lot closer has made this a lot more interesting. But let us know your thoughts. Coming out next video will be our Monaco preview, which is in like 2 days. It starts. We really gotta pick up our shit. But yeah, like
busy times,
mate. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you for the next video or audio. We're on Spotify. God, I gotta keep doing it. Gotta stop doing that. Thanks for watching or listening. God, kill me.
Gotcha.